We often refer to our main sources of energy as fossil fuels. Oil, natural gas, coal, they're fossil fuels because they come from fossils, ancient organic material, forests, jungles, plankton, dinosaurs. Held under the ground for millennia, they transform into oil, gas, and coal. Everybody thinks that's true. On the other hand, there's evidence that maybe it's not the whole story. If that's where fossil fuels come from, if that's how hydrocarbons are made, then how come they're found so deep under the oceans and at the top of the Earth? How come one of Saturn's moons, according to scientists, has more oil and natural gas than Earth? Were there dinosaurs and planktons and forests at one point on one of Saturn's moons? Probably not. So if all hydrocarbons aren't from fossils, where are they from? And why isn't this commonly known? And what are the implications of it? And what does it tell us about our modern climate change policy? These are not just esoteric questions, they're central questions, actually, as we chart the future of energy usage in the world. Willie Soon has been thinking about this for a long time. He's an astrophysicist, a geoscientist. He spent 31 years at Harvard. He recently left, and he joins us here. Dr. Soon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tucker.
I appreciate it.
It's a blessing to be able to come on your show.
Well, it's a blessing to have you. And this is such an interesting question with so many implications.
Yes.
And I want to spend most of our time talking about the implications. But just to the strict question of where hydrocarbons come from, it sounds like they're not necessarily all from ancient forests or plankton or dinosaurs, are they?
Yes. The story can be a bit long, so give me a few minutes to
Yes.
explain. You are certainly right, but most important to clarify is that the information that is found on the largest moon on Saturn, which is called Titan,
Yes.
is actually results from NASA, European Space Agency,
Yes.
and then the Italian Space Agency, who built this spacecraft called Cassini and Huygens. Actually, one of my thesis advisor committee is actually built the UV spectrometer, but the one that they used to discover this, basically the ocean liquid form of methane, which is in ethane form, which is much more complicated hydrocarbon, is whole ocean of it. Because Titan is in such a way that it's very cold, by the way, so it's minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
Hint. Where's the global warming there, right? If it's full of methane there, right? That's another problem because it's far away from the sun. That's what it is.
Yes.
And clearly that the question of abiogenic method, which means no need of any biology, is true. Because we know, actually one experiment was done in 2009. It was done in Swedish Royal Academy, one of those group, but it's done by one Russian leader. He was able to show that if you squeeze methane, CH4 in chemical formula, so 4 hydrogen, 1 carbon, squeeze them in a form that in which they simulate the condition of the Earth mantle, which is 1,800 miles deep,
Yes.
kind of below the surface, because the Earth is deeper, right? And it's within this 18, but basically the condition that is only about 40 to 150 miles in, that you actually can form complex hydrocarbon. You got benzene, you got ethane, you got all this other stuff
Yes.
forming. So that proved beyond doubt that you have such a way to make this. Plus that Titan proved beyond doubt. You actually see methane also in all the atmosphere of Jupiter. You even find benzene in the rocks of Mars. And then for me, astrophysicist, I can tell you even more. You find this complex hydrocarbon called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. It's another one of those complex hydrocarbon. Then actually you found it in interstellar space within stars, intergalactic space. These are everywhere because temperature there are cold and probably the right pressure condition. All this complex hydrocarbons.
Well, it's kind of incredible because all of us, and including myself until very recently,
right,
assumed that all of our main energy sources are these so-called fossil fuels, and of course their existence is going to be limited by the amount of fossils, by the amount of decaying organic material.
Not so.
So if that's not so, then we need to rethink a lot of things.
A lot. I think this one fit into a paradigm by a famous economist that I like very much. His name is Simon. Do you know about this guy named Simon?
Julian Simon.
Julian Simon, yeah, the key guy, University of Illinois and then Maryland. He was the guy who said that the ultimate resource of humanity or Earth is actually not all this material thing like uranium, gold, because uranium, there are far more uranium in the oceans than on the land, right? You have 4.5 billion tons of uranium in the ocean. You have only 17 million tons of that. Gold, copper. What do you want on the ocean? It's all there, except they're in very dilute form.
Yes.
Clearly. So the ultimate resource actually is not that, it's the human mind. It's the innovation part of it. I think I like that principle a lot. And it fits very well in terms of saying that it's all matter of cost. Even oil. I don't know if any of you know, the audience know that 50 to 60% of all the oil that you already drilled, the drill hole, you can only pull out 40 to 50% of it. 60% of that remains in it simply because there's not enough pressure to get it out. This is why the idea of abiogenic oil is interesting. It's true, clearly true. It's all matter of cost, really, because this thing has to form way inside the earth, the mantle, which is 50 to 100 miles, right? Human, how deep have we ever drilled? Only the skin, which is only 5 miles maximum, 5 to 6 miles basically. That's at most that we can drill. And then all this stuff had to permeate into the reservoir. I got this information from the top people that physically have to look for oil every day. One of my friends, Joseph Limecooler from Beacon Energy, offshore energy. Those are the guys who work day in and day out to bring us the energy, actually, the oil that we need.
So why don't most people know this? Why do most people think that the gasoline in their car was, by definition,
have to be limited?
Yeah, that there's just a tiny amount and it's going away. We'll never find more.
The world is full of untruth and half-truths, right? That's the whole problem, right? That's why for so long, even the idea that we are not limited and bounded by availability of, let's say, gasoline, petroleum, or coal. Coal now they won't allow us to use, right? As you know, in COP meeting in Dubai that just ended a day ago, they just physically declared themselves that we should stop using fossil fuel. Basically, petroleum, natural gas, and even coal. I mean, these people are insane now, really insane. I think they're going to harm more people with their own delusion. Plus, they always remember, these are people who actually don't represent the majority. No. Since when are this put up to vote? It's always about this minority, the tyranny of the few, always robbing the whole census, the good census of the good people. This is part of the reason why, as a scientist, I also speak out. Not afraid of anything except for just telling the truth. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to say such thing in your show.
So, I mean, if we haven't been told the truth about where hydrocarbons come from,
right, and
we haven't, I've never met a single person in my life who said, wait a second, they're not all fossil fuels, then we keep hearing there's a scientific consensus on climate change. Every scientist believes the same thing about it, believes Al Gore and John Kerry. Maybe that's not true either?
Oh, that I can tell you, please. Thank you for asking that question, Tucker. I've been working on this subject of CO2 causing climate change, or what other factors we can ask that cause climate to change, for close to since my postdoctoral year, 1991, right? So it's about 32 years. And on this question, I think we have a very definitive answer. What we know now is CO2 ain't gonna cost nothing. It's not gonna change much of the climatic system, which means it won't change the speed of the hurricane. It won't change how fast or how frequent tornado form. It won't even actually make any difference to the polar bear population. It's all conservation issue, right, on polar bear. It won't even cause how much fish you don't catch. It won't even cause what they call ocean acidification. It won't even cause this problem that they claim. It's all artificial. Everything they do, it's all dreamed from their model and the tyranny of the few again. That those few people just dream up this scary story that it just ain't true. And then when you come down to the most responsible group for this kind of bad stuff, I was reminded by my colleague, Dr. Ronan Connolly and Michael Connolly, my two co-workers with me on my group, is to say that since I work so carefully and I have about more than 100 scientists the last 3 years alone working with me, so I don't speak on behalf of them, I speak on behalf of myself. My view is that the UNIPCC, United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is one of the primary problems, which means they have been misleading people. They've been using authority of science, which is not true. right? It's all governmental hackers, basically, right? People like John Kerry, who I guess can barely take a proper physics class, who keep claiming that greenhouse effect is so simple, right? And then he refused to explain how does it work, right? I mean, he did all of that. That is very terrible. That really embarrassing to America. He did that in Bali in Indonesia several years back. That is just so embarrassing.
Do you think he can explain how it works?
No, I don't think so. Even Al Gore, who claimed to know something about science, I challenge Al Gore. I did some of that in his face, actually. I was lucky enough to be in one of those Wall Street Journal eco conference, and I was giving, setting up with all the UC Santa Barbara students. Please make sure when the question comes out, give me the mic. I was making friends with them the night before. I explained now my details of my work. So I got the mic and I asked questions about Al Gore, because one of the primary sad things that they refuse to recognize, that I know you know that in even grade school sciences, CO2 is a gas of life. When you have more CO2, the plant kingdom, the whole ecology, even the oceans, gonna have more, basically, ability, more fishes, more everything.
More life.
More life, essentially. That's why it's called gas of life. And these people want to demonize it as some gas that can cause global warming, can cause hurricane to run faster or weaker. I don't know what they want. To have more rain, more droughts, and all this other nonsense that they claim. All of that, it just ain't so. That's the problem. By the way, this is how serious I am. I check everything they say. I check. As a scientist, you cannot just dismiss them. You cannot laugh at them. You cannot, chide them. You cannot just make joke of them. You check everything. So as a very serious scientist, and I publish scientific paper refuting all of these arguments. Scientific papers maybe mean nothing to the average people, but it's really important. It's like a document that you have to document and then put out the proper scientific arguments about what is right, what is wrong. So that's what we have been doing at my particular center called series-science.com. So anybody who wants more information about this, please go to the website, right? And study what we do there, because we are the one that is truly independent from any funding agency, any money that you could possibly give me, like Bill Gates, please don't give me money, thank you. And Al Gore, please don't give me money. Don't give me any money if you tell me what to do. Even some of your money, I might not want it. But the point is that I want to be independent, just like you. In the media, I want to be fearless. I just set my own agenda. You don't tell me what to research either. I research what I want to research. So we've been researching on many, many topics. So on the climate change issue, I'm fully convinced. After all these years, even though we may not know exactly what is causing climate change, we suspect it's the sun. We have a lot of evidence to show that it's probably the sun. Very high percentage, I would say 90% we're sure, but not 100%. But we know carbon dioxide is not the gas, it's not what you call your thermometer in your room can adjust up and down, that you can set the temperature to be whatever level you want it. First of all, they can never tell us what temperature do they want it at. What is the temperature you want to set the global temperature? Al Gore has not been able to answer that. John Kerry has not been able to answer that. Because we know the temperature from the coldest in Siberia to the desert in Sahara. I mean, these are huge, at least 100 degrees or more kind of differences.
Yes.
I mean, who are you to tell me which temperature is the correct temperature where you guys are talking like that? They are talking as if they are pseudo-God, they're God themselves. I mean, these people are so ambitious that in some sense, I think we have to keep their ambition down a little bit. I mean, these people are not contented, just like what you put out there. You cannot be ambitious when you're contented, but these people are so out of their mind in some sense that I think is misleading. And somebody had to speak out against them. I think you are one of those who consistently point out their hypocrisy, right? And I really find that the whole problem of this global warming is a complete nothing, which means we should do nothing about it. Just go on and live life and adapt to it, right?
So of course I agree completely, but here's what I don't understand. Global temperatures have dramatically fluctuated within the period that humans left records. I mean, not that long ago. I mean, there are cities underwater because sea levels have risen within recorded history.
Mm-hmm.
The signs of the glaciers are all around us.
Yes.
So that was all before the internal combustion engine. How do they explain that?
This is the problem. They admitted. A lot of them admitted. They willingly admitted. You can read all.
Well, you can't deny it. I mean, we had glaciers and then they melted because of global warming.
They are forced to confess. I mean, these are the confession time. It's the sun actually that does a lot of this. The glacier, like there's a period called Little Ice Age.
Yes.
From about 1300 to 1900, right, very cold. And then there's a medieval warm period from 880 to about 1200. It was warm. I mean, you can grow wine in England, right? And now you cannot grow wine, right? Things like that. I mean, Greenland was green back then,
yes.
But now it's full of glaciers. Ice is coming in. So what are you talking about exactly? And it was the sun, actually. The sun fit quite well. As far as we know, in terms of deducing the information of how does the sun, how bright was it, how dim was it? Basically, just like that. Just the amount of light coming out from the sun. Very tiny percentage, by the way. Very small. It's on the order of less than 1%, but it's more than enough because there's another effect that is very, very important. It's basically because the sun, the earth is forced to go around the sun. And then the orbit change ever so slightly because of perturbation from all the other planets.
Yes.
Jupiter, Saturn, and even Venus and Mars. They are actually controlling what we do. And the moon, of course, is very important. But that other factors, the orbits, plus the changes of the sun by itself, between how bright, how dim it is, these two factors can explain just about everything that we know. All the data that I have, actually. So I've been this is why I was so fascinated in studying this issue. I spent my whole life actually studying this. Nothing but doing just this. And the more I understand, the more I think that, wow, it's just a gap to be filled in. We have too much information and then these people come along, say that CO2 is causing everything. I check. Oh, maybe they're right. I check. As a scientist, I have to check them. But then it's not even close. I mean, these people are talking about things that is, there's a famous phrase by a very famous Wisconsin meteorologist. His name is Professor Reed Bryson. He's one of the father of climatology, really. He just say that you go out and then you might as well, if you think CO2 is so, you might as well spit into the air and see what happened to the airflow. He was just basically saying that CO2 is nothing, cannot cause the climate to change or anything. It doesn't change anything, actually. It's the sun. Why you think the most important things that you should talk about, they never talk about that. They always want to average the data. The most important thing they should talk about, you know what? It's the season. No two winters are the same. No two summers are the same. And they never explain that. It's actually the orbits with the sun changing it ever so slightly. And I'm not talking. I have published papers like that on all this to show and document why and how. That's what the fun part of doing science. It's not only chit-chatting, hand-waving like crazy. You have to be, even though I may look like one now, but I am always very calm when you write down. Every time I have to write a paper, I always tell my wife, please, don't disturb me for a few days. I'll be back. Things like that. Of course, working at home, but I'll be back.
So is there any way to predict what climate change will be based on
Actually, you can because of the orbit. The only thing we don't know is how to predict the sun changes by itself because the magnetism, just the magnetic field on the sun is too complicated. The sun is the magnetized ball, right? It's a gas, hot gas. It's about, the magnetic field is so strong, it's 10,000 times stronger than the Earth. The Earth is also a magnet, a bar magnet, basically.
Yes.
It's 1 Gauss, we have 10,000 Gauss at least on the sun. So it's a very different property. And it works very differently because it heated by basically a thermonuclear reaction inside the sun. So it created all kinds of hot gas behavior that is very difficult to try to master or even to model using mathematical equation. Actually, it's much easier to study the Earth than to do the sun. So that's part of the problem in scientific tasks, the physics task. They're very difficult. But then we learn a lot. We learn a lot through just watching the sun. Galileo Galilei, right? He pointed his telescope. He was smart enough. First, he pointed to Jupiter, the moon, right? Jupiter, then he saw the moon, right? He saw 4 moons around it. And then he's smart that he go the next day to watch it again. He watched and then he started to move. By the way, the famous story of Galileo Galilei, we'll talk about it someday. When he wrote that down, initially it was in Italian. When he realized he discovered something so unique, he changed the language to Latin. And the next day, I got it, man, the good one. So he started writing in Latin, precise language, okay? But anyway, for the sun, it's really so complicated that actually I've been studying this actually as long as you know me. I studied this for so long. We know a lot. I even wrote a popular book actually to try to explain why that during a period of the sunspot. So Galileo Galilei started in 1609, 1610 or so. So we have about now 413 years of data. But there's a period that deep inside the Little Ice Age, 1645 to 1715, is called the Maunder Minimum. Because during that period, the sunspot almost all disappear, especially in the northern hemisphere. It disappeared completely. Nobody know why. And that's why the French astronomer, famous people like Cassini, the one that the Cassini spacecraft, he was observing at that time. He said, man, this Galileo guy must be on either drinking too much or lying or things like that. He said there's a lot of sunspot, but we observe at this time, we didn't see nothing. What's wrong? But it's an actual phenomenon, right? My friend, my good friend, which is the #1 world sunspot historian, he just wrote email to me, Douglas Hoyt. He actually was the master of this, collecting all the sunspot data, going back to all the major libraries, from Galileo first point all the way to present point. Basically found that this phenomenon is true because during that period, the sunspot was not there, not because nobody was watching. There was at least observed 80% of the time during the 70 years. You see, it's so unique, that period. But now we're beginning to try to learn what happened there. So during that period, we really think that the sun was so much dimmer, was substantially dimmer. This is why you have this Little Ice Age phenomenon. All the Thames River were froze. We have the Thames River in England, well known, and then all the ice skating thing, in Holland, all the different culture. And then these are all real, actual phenomenon. And then this day, they're trying to say that maybe Little Ice Age is not Little Ice Age. They even try to change that in scientific field, actually. So this was very, very puzzling for me.
Why would they try and change that?
Oh, I don't know, because they want to say that CO2 is controlling everything. They kind of want to have CO2 as the prime driver of everything. This is part of the problem that I find.
Well, that's not science, that's lying.
It's bad. It's bad in science. This is why in science now, I rather say this thing outright. I rather have question that cannot be answered than answer that cannot be questioned. Because these people are just offering you the answer and then you should just shut up, like you say. Don't ask any question. Don't criticize. Don't even bother to think. Just accept what we say. I mean, you may have known that this, actually, if you want to get there, I can talk about this because this is rather famous because the other person is still around. He's the one who's shouting up and down these last 2 days to say that, we must stop fossil fuel. GOP is so evil. We must stop all of them because GOP are the evil political bodies in America that causes all this fossil fuel we are using fossil fuel and all that. His name is Professor Michael Mann. He's at University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
He created a paper, we call it a hockey stick.
Yes.
The stick paper.
The hockey stick.
He basically said that the temperature history, first of all, the true temperature history looked like this. That it was very warm from 800 AD, let's say warm, and then it cools down, about 1300 started to go down, cool. And then since about 1900th century, it started to warm back up. Way, way before CO2 is important, okay? That's another puzzle that they never want to explain. That look like this. That's the real story. Michael Mann came along, said that, he used mathematical algorithm, okay? You can use fancy word, but believe me, it's just mathematical algorithm that he produced a stick for 800 AD to about 1900 AD is all flat because it changed. It changed very tiny amount. So small that actually it doesn't mean anything. 0.1 or 0.2 degrees Celsius, so small. It doesn't mean, the one that I talk about, the change is 1 degree at least, so 5-6 times bigger than what he say. And then he just said it's like this, and then it warmed up because of the blade, which is the warming because of rising carbon dioxide. But he forgot to explain to you, this warming of the temperature started way before even the human part of the atmospheric carbon dioxide could be anything meaningful. This is part of the problem. It's all been crazy from day one. When this thing was published in 1999, I was the first few guy who raised a hand at the back of the class and say, excuse me, Professor Mann, he used to be my friend, by the way. Now he will never answer me. He used to exchange email with me because, we more or less share the same passion, want to understand things. Now he just say that his story is the only one that is correct. But it's not backed out by any data that we know. That's the problem. It's all mathematical products. This is how scary the whole world can be. And United Nations, the IPCC group that I mentioned, promoted his work, turned him into a major hero because he has solved one of these puzzle problem that climatologists over millennia has been trying to solve since the day of the Greeks to try to understand how climate change. And this guy come along say that it look like this, only CO2 does it.
A standoff at the southern border. Texas not backing down after a Supreme Court